Folks, welcome to the History of Narrow Gauge Railways, Part 4. This is the Denver and Rio Grande Western Southern Lines. Last month was it last month or 2 months ago? I was with you. We did the Northern Narrow Gauge lines. So this is the ones that people are more familiar with. And regardless of narrow gauge, the modeling of narrow gauge railways is a very popular subject in the model railroading fraternity. There are even regularly scheduled meetings for those interested. And these float all over the country, the Narrow Gauge Modeling Association. Without the prototype, there would be no modeling. Tell that to some of the model railroaders I know say, oh, well, I'm not interested in prototype. Well, then what are you modeling? This is the second of three, actually 2.5 features on the Denver and Rio Grande Western Narrow Gauge. Well, usually I do this tonight. In tonight's segment, we will look at one railroad's lines in the state of Colorado, the railroad which became synonymous with the term narrow gauge. The Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge through the cameras of Richard Kindig and Richard B. Jackson, the Southern Lines. Starting in the very late 1930s and continuing until the last common carrier train ran, the Denver and Rio Grande Western's 3-foot narrow gauge lines were pursued by rail enthusiast photographers. Using the work of two of them, let's tour the system as it was. This is the Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge circle. Basically, it begins in Alamosa, goes south through Cumbres Pass to Durango. Then you take a detour of the Rio Grande Southern to Ridgeway. From Ridgeway, we go to the Northern Lines, which we visited last time, up to Montrose, and then through the Gunnison Canyon and Marshall Pass, then on to the Valley Line, down through Moffett and Gibson, and back to Alamosa. When this was intact, it was a wonderful economic operating system. And a guy by the name of Al Perlman, who was also associated with the Penn Central and New York Central, figured out a way to shut this down because he didn't, as general manager of the Denver and Rio Grande Western, he didn't like the deal. But we won't dwell on that too much. The Southern Lines were focused on Alamosa. This is the passenger station there. And this was a dual gauge facility. The Alamosa Roundhouse before the standard gauge stalls were added. Yeah, that's all narrow gauge equipment you see in the view. And it's about turn of the 20th century. The engine facilities at Alamosa were responsible for locomotives on the San Juan extension to Durango as far as Chama, the Chile line to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and half the motive power on the Valley line to Salida. Valley line. We looked at this briefly in the northern section, and we're going to just quickly review it. The Orient branch opened from Mears Junction to Orient, formerly Hot Springs Mine, via Via Grove, 27.8 miles on October 28, 1881. The San Luis branch, 54 miles long, between Villa Grove and Alamosa, was opened on November 9, 1890. This included a 51-mile straight section, which I think was well, it's definitely the longest narrow gauge section of track in the United States. And I think in terms of all types of gauges, it's second or third longest. The Valley line, which is the yellow arrows are pointing to, linked the northern and southern narrow gauge systems. And that was actually the reason it was built, just so they had a link between the two systems. Trackage between Alamosa and Hooper was made dual gauge during 1930. Hooper to Mears Junction abandoned during 1950. The dual gauge trackage between Hooper and Alamosa was made standard gauge only during 1951. Abandonment of the remaining trackage was approved on November 21st, 1958. Here's the 497 passing under the telltale at Mears Junction circa 1946 in an R.W. Richardson photograph. And the former Valley Line grade approaching Mears Junction on October 15th, 1955 by Richard B. Jackson. 492 with a southbound freight approaching Round Hill, November 4th, 1949, Richard W. Richardson. And the 480 near Villa Grove, November 1950, Ralph W. Richardson. This happens to be one of my favorite Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge shots. And I don't know, there's just something about it. Today, this valley has a lot of irrigation in it. There are farms, some of them growing marijuana, which makes for interesting. I mean, have you ever seen a farm field with the 10-foot high barbed wire walls around it? And the 499, which was the highest numbered of the narrow gauge steam locomotives near Moscow or Moffett, 1950, in an R.W. Andrews photo. Okay, let's get to the San Juan extension. Narrow gauge track reached Alamosa on June 26, 1878. The 28.7 miles of track from Alamosa to Antonito was completed in April 1880. By December 31st, 1880, 33.2 miles from Antonito towards Chama was constructed. The final 68.5 miles into Chama and Durango was completed with a silver spike ceremony on July 27, 1881. A map of the San Juan extension from Alamosa to Chama. And, this arrow is Alamosa, here's Chama, and here's Cumbres Pass. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Map of the San Juan extension from Chama, which is here on the right, to Durango. This section is completely gone, but that's later in the story. By 1891, trackage east and west of Alamosa was converted to standard gauge. The 3-foot gauge remained on the valley line to Mears Junction. Dual gauge trackage was in place to Antonito. The San Juan extension from Antonito to Durango was abandoned on December 5th, 1968. The narrow gauge third rail between Antonito and Alamosa was removed after this date. The states of Colorado and New Mexico jointly purchased the former San Juan extension between Chama and outside the Denver and Rio Grande Western Antonito station limits during September 1970. The railway between Chama and Antonito was renamed the Compass and Toltec Scenic Railroad. It operated its first public train on June 26, 1971. And that's a separate presentation, actually, from this show. The San Juan Express, during 1936-1937, the Denver and Rio Grande Western modernized 22 narrow gauge passenger cars. Basically, they put vestibules on them and electric lights and steam heating. The San Juan Express was inaugurated between Alamosa and Durango on February 9th, 1937. The San Juan Express was discontinued on January 31st, 1951. Let's start with an assortment of Richard Kindig images of the San Juan Express on various dates from 1939 to 1950. The 483 westbound at Sublette on April 28th, 1950. Oops, sorry, I hit the button too fast. 484 westbound at Sublette. Now, what you see behind the locomotive is a typical consist of the San Juan Express. An RPO baggage car, the baggage section in that car being used to store mail, a full-length baggage express car, a coach, and then on the rear of the train, which is very barely visible, is a parlor observation car. That's pretty much the standard consist of the San Juan Express, except the usual passenger locomotives were for the 470 series, not the 480 series. And here's the 483 on a double-headed freight at Sublette. We don't have a date for this. The rear of the westbound San Juan Express silhouetted by the Toltec Tunnel. And the 482 in the snow at Toltec Gorge on December 31st, 1949. Interesting shot. You got to hike in about 10 miles, take the one picture, and then hike out for 10 miles. 495 in Chama during a snowstorm is seen from inside the very warm parlor car of the westbound San Juan Express. 482 and 478 meet with the San Juan Express trains at Caracas, undated. And this is number 1 of the series. And here's number 2 of the series with the 478 coming up close. Now, the 478 got the nickname of sports models. I have no idea why. 475 westbound, 1 mile east of Carbon Junction, June 30th, 1939. Looks like there's a lot of head-end traffic this day. What's this? 3 baggage cars ahead of the normal RPO. 475 arriving at Durango on June 30th, 1939. And the 473 with a pilot plow at Durango on January 5th, 1950. Richard Kindig caught Denver and Rio Grande Western 498 and 499 on an Alamosa Chama freight on February 22nd, 1954, and then the 494 and 498 on a Chama Durango freight on February 23rd, 1954. And here's the 498 and 499 in Alamosa. And here they are near Henry with a consist of mixed, narrow, and standard gauge cars. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had a small fleet of compromised coupler cars, which I think had just recently been commercially modeled, if memory serves me correctly. 498 and 499 with a mixed consist 3 miles north of Antonito. And the 498 and 499 with a mixed consist crossing the Conejos River Bridge. And the 499 switching next to the Antonito Coal Dock. 494 and 498, 1 mile west of Chama on February 23rd, 1954. Here's that same consist 2 miles north of La Baca, crossing a small pile trestle. And that's New Mexico Route 17, that dirt road in the foreground. By the way, it's been paved now. 494 and 498 passing the Ignacio Depot. And here they are departing Ignacio. Richard B. Jackson photographed Denver and Rio Grande and Western locomotives in the Shard of Chama on June 27, 1954, as well as other equipment. It's a little blurry, but the section crew is arriving at Chama. 481 and 499 at the ready track at Chama. 481, 489, and 495 by the Chama coaling tower. 499 on the Chama ready track. And 495 switching a Gramps tanker near the Chama storehouse. Most of everything you see here in Chama is intact. Here's the 478 in the yard at Chama. 481, 499, and 495 moving away from the Chama coaling tower. While the coaling tower is still there in Chama, the Cumbers and Toltec Scenic don't use it to service their locomotives. Caboose second 0505 in the Chama yard. Chama, New Mexico station, another era, another operator. This entire section here to the left was added on by the Compass and Toltec Scenic. It now houses the reservation operators for the Compass and Toltec Scenic. The station originally ended right around here. This roof over here, that's a building across the street and up on the bluff. It's a line of retail stores. Here's the Chama engine house looking east back in the day. The Chama engine house replaced all but one stall of the roundhouse that once served as part of the railroad. Chama supplied pushers for the 4% grade up to Cumbers and locomotives for the Cumbers to Durango section of the San Juan extension. It was also home to snowplows. Here's a rear view of rotary snowplow OM in Chama. Notice the roof over the coal pocket in the tender, the separate water car over here to the right. Now, even though these have the numbers OM, which is the number of the rotary plow on it, they actually had separate numbers in the rolling stock roster. Another paint scheme, another photographer, another era, the front of rotary OM, now on display in Chama. It's no longer operational. It probably could be made operational, but it isn't. Denver, Rio Grande, and Western numbers 495, 481, and 499 on a late afternoon freight from Chama to Cumbers on June 27, 1954, captured by Richard B. Jackson. And here they are at the turning on the Chama Y. Fortunately, it's one of those ugly rear three-quarter pictures. And here's 495 in the West Chama shop at Chama Yard. 481 and 495 getting into position to couple onto their train for the hill turn. Now, here's how the hill turn worked. Two locomotives would take 12 freight cars up the grade to Cumbers. They would then turn on the Y, come back down to Chama, grab another 12 cars, take them up to Cumbers, assemble the train into a 24-car passenger freight train, and take it on to Antonito. Here's 495 and 481 out of the picture on the head end 1 mile east of Chama. 495 and 481 at the sheep loading pen at Lobato. There was always a sheep loading pen here, but never any other facilities. Then a movie company came in and thought it would be a wonderful spot to film a movie. So they built a water tower. They built the pieces of a station that they needed. And today, parts of that movie set still remain in this area. Here's the 495 and 481 departing Lobato. And the 493 with the freight at an unknown location, but seemed like a nice place to stick it in. 483 on a pusher on a freight, possibly at Lobato. And June 27th, 1954, 495 and 481 separated for crossing the Lobato Trestle. Now, the Lobato Trestle was a wood structure and was only rated for one steam locomotive. So the train would come, the train with the 12 freight cars would come out of Chama double-headed. The train would stop. The lead locomotive would go across the trestle, and then the second locomotive would grab the 12 cars and bring them across the trestle, and then they would couple up again and head on up to Cumbers. And not everything made it up the grade to Cumbers. Here's a wrecked gondola near Cresco. And 495 and 481 approaching the Cresco water tank. Some of these shots I can describe more as moody than the real authentic. 483 is pusher approaching Cresco water tank 1 on another day. And here's number 2 with a little closer view. Some nice detail there of the Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge boxcar. Sunset, a little fog, 495 and 481 coming into Cumbers. The 499 is pushing. And here they are continuing with the water crane there in the foreground. And again, the sunset has some nasty things with the light. Denver and Rio Grande Western, number 495 on an Alamosa Antonito freight, standard gauge cars in the consist on July 3rd, 1960. 3 images by Richard Kindig. And here is good view of the compromised coupler car. And here's 1 mile north of La Jara. And the 495 switching at Antonito. It looks like the compromised coupler car is still attached, so it's probably switching standard gauge cars. And here it is by the water tank. The standard gauge cars have been put in the siding. The two compromised coupler cars have been coupled together with the caboose behind the locomotive. Richard Kindig braved the snows on the Colorado-New Mexico border to capture two images of the rotary snowplow train. I've added some additional images to this sequence. So the 483, 487, and 488 with rotary OY near Bighorn on March 5th, 1962. And detail from the previous images of the snow exiting the rotary. Even though I've scanned the slide at 600 dots per inch, there just wasn't a lot of focus in that slide. And OY seen from the 483 plowing snow on the evening of March 6, 1962, near Cumbres. This is a 1935 view from the internet of rotary OM on the pass. I suspect it's been retouched quite a bit. And rotary OY returning to Chama on March 23rd, 1952 by Ralph W. Richardson. Now notice there's the consist behind it. In this consist would be a bunk car for enginemen, a bunk car for track workers, a tool car carrying equipment, and sometimes a wheel and tackle car for dealing with derailments. They didn't go out with just the plow. And here's the OY, which we saw in that previous picture. It's got a water tank created out of a former UTLX tank car behind it. During most of the 1950s and 1960s, it was the practice of the Denver Rio Grande Western to bring all the Silverton equipment to Alamosa during the winter for maintenance work. This transfer was usually done in a single equipment move. Richard B. Jackson caught this extra train on several occasions. A 490 with the equipment train, possibly in Durango. Trust me. And here it is at the Durango Depot. Going the wrong way for the Silverton. 490, here he is departing Durango. And along the river east of Durango. They used to sell tickets for this, and it was a one-way trip all day, no guarantees, and very little services. But they used to fill it up. Here it is between Durango and Chama. Still between Durango and Chama. And the equipment train in an unknown location. Here we are climbing Windy Point. By the way, this picture can still be taken, but with Compass and Toltec Scenic cars in the train and no pusher. Here we are coming up the slopes of Compass Pass. And we sort of jumped ahead to the lava flats outside of Antonito. I have to tell you, I have no idea how this picture was taken. Unless there was a low-flying helicopter, there's like nothing out there. Or if there's a water tank, maybe he was up on that water tank. And here we're meeting a freight in Antonito. Well, actually, here's the freight. A little closer view of the freight. And there it goes. And to handle the passing at Antonito, the 490 and the equipment train backed into the Chili line in Antonito. This is the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Antonito station, which is not the same as the Compass and Toltec Scenic station. Compass and Toltec Scenic have never used this building. The Antonito station, which I just pointed out, another photographer, another era. And it's got a sign on it that this is a potential historic building that is in danger of being lost. While the 490 stands in the Chile line, the 484 passes with a freight in Antonito. And here's that 484 and the freight on the lava flats west of Antonito. And then with the 481 pushing in the middle of the train. And there's a distance view of that same train. Went to Alamosa has to come back to Durango for the season. Spring on the east side of Compass Pass. And here we have the curve. And there's the entire equipment of the Silverton laid out on the curve. Climbing towards Compass. Let's take a few miscellaneous images and get into Alamosa. Here's a double head freight led by the 486. 493 in the yard in Alamosa. 493 moving a coal hopper or a gondola full of coal in Alamosa. And now the 483 is being coaled. Chile line. Denver and Rio Grande, 91.3-mile-long branch from Antonito to Española was completed on December 31st, 1880. The Santa Fe Southern, formerly the Texas, Santa Fe, and Northern Railroad. Now, isn't that a name for you? Texas, Santa Fe, and Northern Railroad. Despite that grandiose name, it only completed a 34.3-mile, 3 feet narrow gauge line between the towns of Santa Fe and Española on January 8th, 1887. And then the Santa Fe Southern was merged into the Denver and Rio Grande during 1895. Here's in the circa 1900 map of the Chile line or Santa Fe branch. It came off the San Juan extension in Antonito, went south to Caliente, and then turned a little bit west and through Española and then reached Santa Fe. Now, if I'm real good, this passed through a very minor town, which I don't think isn't even on the map, which was where the U.S. Army developed the nuclear bombs. And unfortunately, this line was abandoned before the Army established that base. If the line had stayed around another year, history might have been different. Fat fingers, I apologize. The Chile Liner Santa Fe branch from Antonito to Santa Fe saw its last mixed passenger train on September 1st, 1941. The line was given over to the junk man during 1942. The classic image of the Chile line passing the church in Santa Fe. This image is by Otto Perry, and the train was always a mixed train on the Chile line. Here's Ralph Richardson caught the Santa Fe mixed at Española in this undated image. And here's a real oldie. William H. Jackson's posed picture of Denver and Rio Grande 100 near Española, circa 1900. Cervaleta, New Mexico, with the 473 being oiled during a stop. R.W. Richardson image. There's no freight in the consist that day, and notice the palatial establishment that serves as a Cervaleta station. It's basically a grounded boxcar. And, well, we basically saw this picture already, the 490 and the equipment train backed into the Chile line in Antonito. The Farmington branch. During 1905, the 47.07-mile-long Farmington branch was constructed from Carbon Junction to Farmington, New Mexico. It was built to the standard gauge in anticipation of a Chicago, Rock Island Pacific branch coming into Farmington. That was never built. Durango to Carbon Junction, 2.39 miles, was rebuilt as dual gauge during 1905. During 1923, the Farmington branch was converted to narrow gauge. And here's the Farmington branch from Carbon Junction, which is right near Durango, all the way south through Cedar Hill, Aztec to Farmington. Farmington branch was abandoned December 5th, 1968, the same date as the San Juan extension. Richard B. Jackson chased the Farmington turn with the 490 out of Durango on July 30th, 1958. And here's the 490 backing by the Durango stock pens to pick up its train. There are no longer any stock pens in Durango. It's all been redeveloped. And picking up its train, it now heads back. Here's 1 mile south of Durango. It hasn't yet reached Carbon Junction. And here's Carbon Junction. It's basically a switch. And here's the train leaving Carbon Junction. Now, these flat cars are carrying the pipes used for oil well, which was basically this traffic was the lifeblood of the Denver and Rio Grande Narrow Gauge in the 1950s and 1960s. And 1 mile south of Carbon Junction. And there was a large trestle about 1.5 miles south of Carbon Junction. To the rear of the Farmington turn from the caboose near Bondad. On a bridge south of Bondad, again from the caboose. Number 490 near Aztec. And the rear 3/4 from the same basics area. And passing the Aztec Depot. And the 490 with the locomotive itself just past the depot. South of Aztec. And you can see the drill pipe loads on board the train. Passing the, passing the Farmington water tank. Another view, same general area. Past the Farmington tank, obscured by smoke. South into the Farmington yard. And here the 490 is being uncoupled from freight cars. And it's doing some switching. And a classic scene of brakemen riding the side of the cars in Farmington Yard. Get an idea how small the narrow gauge boxcars are by comparing it with the size of the train crewmen. And did anyone say fly switching? Yeah, that boxcar is being fly switched. And here's the brakeman screwing down the brakes. And the 490 is returning to Durango here. Bridge near Aztec. Silverton Branch. This should be familiar to most rail enthusiasts, whether you're model or prototype or whatever. The San Juan extension was completed at Durango on July 27th, 1881. Track building on the Silverton branch was halted 1.3 miles beyond Rockwood in early December 1881. 19.1 miles of track had been built. The 26.5 miles of track into Silverton were completed on July 8th, 1882. At the 1948-1949 Chicago Railroad Fair, a Denver and Rio Grande narrow gauge train was available for visitors to ride, sparking some interest in the narrow gauge when people were told this equipment still ran in Colorado. The movie Ticket to Tomahawk premiered on April 18, 1950 in both Durango and Denver, Colorado. Suddenly, there was a large interest in riding the Silverton mixed train. The Denver and Rio Grande Western embraced this new tourist-based traffic by introducing the yellow and black painted train on June 18, 1950. The Denver and Rio Grande Western was now in the rail tourist business. Now here's a map of the Silverton branch. It begins at Durango with an end-on junction with the San Juan extension and goes straight up to Silverton. Now in Durango, over here to the left, this is the Rio Grande Southern. After the abandonment of the San Juan extension on December 5th, 1968, the Silverton branch became an isolated steam-operated railway with goals not compatible with the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. Attempts to abandon the line were unsuccessful. Yes, the Denver and Rio Grande Western went into the Interstate Commerce Commission and applied for abandonment. They said, this is passenger service. We're not a passenger line. So the ICC asked them a question. How much money did you lose on it? Oh, we don't lose any money. We make money on it. The ICC was not amused. They did sell it. On March 25th, 1981, the branch was sold to the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. Richard Kindig rode the Silverton Turn, a mixed train, on July 1st, 1939. This train had number 478, 25 freight cars, a coach, and a caboose. The train is seen from the caboose. Climbing Missionary Ridge. This is at initial grade out of Durango. Now it's on the High Line, 1 mile north of Rockwood. Again, you're on the train. Notice the beginning of the train has a big block of stock cars. The Silverton Turn at Tacoma from the train. This is where the power station is located. And the Cascade water tank. Needleton tank from the train. Silverton Turn downgrade at Tacoma on the return trip. Richard Kindig again rode the Silverton Turn on June 6, 1951. The engine is number 478. There are 20 freight cars, a coach, and a caboose in this train. The train is seen from the caboose. They were out climbing Missionary Ridge again, arriving at Rockwood with a brakeman on the car top. Rockwood is where they stop and pick up, now the company's been told to stop and picks up people for the adventure land where you slide along the cables. They have their own red painted cars. Silverton Turn 3 miles north of Rockwood. It's just coming off the High Line area. And Tacoma. That brakeman is still on top. He must be enjoying his fresh air. 2 miles north of Tacoma from the Silverton Turn. The Wilderness Ranch. Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember before. I apologize for fumbling. This is a passing seen from the passing train. Today, this whole area is set up with recreational areas. The train stops, passengers get off. A very dramatic scene from north of Needleton. Unfortunately, passengers don't see it too much anymore because everything has a roof on it. The coach and the caboose from the Silverton Turn at the Silverton Depot. And 2 images of an interesting locomotive on the Silverton Turn in Durango on August 20th, 1952. 463, a mud hen with the Silverton Turn at Durango Depot. And here it is, the mud hen switching in Durango. Richard Kindig rode the caboose of the Silverton Turn on September 17th, 1952. I was 2 days shy of being 3 months old on that day. The engine was the 473, and the train consisted of 9 stock cars, 1 boxcar, 1 gondola, a baggage car, 2 coaches, and a caboose on a beautiful fall day. And there we are just above, on the upgrade, just above Hermosa. And here's the High Line. And 2 miles above Rockwood from the train. The Silverton Turn upgrade near Elk Park from the train. Again, that magnificent view that is almost lost to the traveling public today. One time there was a snow shed along the Silverton, and these are the remains of it, about 3 miles south of Silverton. The remains just ahead of the train, and 1 mile south of Silverton from the train, and the 473 on the Silverton Y, and the 473 in the Silverton turn ready to leave Silverton southbound. Now, when the Denver Rio Grande Western got really big into the tourist business, they extended the track into the village of Silverton, and this station area became virtually unused. Trains passed through there, but it was unused. Okay, Richard B. Jackson, June 28th, 1955. Two-train concerts by the Durango Depot. So popular, they ended up painting more cars yellow and putting on 2 trains a day. Here's the 478 backing onto its train at Durango and coupled, and with a northbound train at Hermosa. There's a grade through here, so these trains work very hard through this area. And just north of Hermosa, the Alamosa, which is a parlor car on the tail of the Silverton train, and the 478 at what is now the passenger stop in Silverton. And another view of the whole train. Some work cars in Silverton on October 2nd, 1961. Hey, we're winding down now. The Teft Spur Sawmill, located at milepost 478.02 on the Silverton branch, are the remains of a spur with some rolling stock rotting away. Well, there was. They're no longer there. In October 1911, severe weather caused floods that damaged much of the Denver and Rio Grande trackage in southern Colorado. There was a tremendous demand for timber by the railroad. Outside contractors were also needed to work on the repairs. No less than Otto Mears, the pathfinder of the San Juan, was hired to do work on the Silverton branch, which included the construction of a sawmill along the Animas River. Certain pieces of rolling stock from the 3 little lines in Silverton were brought into the sawmill site, which was linked to the Silverton line by a spur. This sawmill lasted only a few years in operation. The 1,489-foot-long spur was apparently intact until 1946. Richard B. Jackson explored the Teft Spur on a site on an unknown date. View looking down the Teft Spur right-of-way towards the sawmill site. This is one of 2 Silverton Northern coaches moved to Teft. So is this the former Silverton Railroad Red Mountain? We know it's not the Silverton Railroad Yankee Girl, as that was a combine. And I don't recommend this for anyone. Here's the interior of the car. Some additional cars at the end of Teft Spur. Now, this particular car was originally Denver and Rio Grande Western 5, a baggage car. It's been recovered and it sits on the ground in Silverton, owned by the San Juan County Historical Society. They have any intentions to restore it. Remains of Silverton, Gladstone, and Northerly 32 at Teft. Let's finish this trip back in time at the Durango Roundhouse. The 2 trains are back from Silverton. Night has fallen. The 473 on the left and the 478 outside of the Durango Roundhouse. Here's the 473 in all its floodlit glory. I want to thank Joe Bucks for giving me 4 carousels of slides that were just unbelievable. Okay, no claim of copyright is made for any image with the caption box outline. Those copyrights remain with their owners. Text copyright 2019 by Edward M. Koehler Jr. Thank you for your attendance and attention. Are there any questions? I'm going to end the slide and then end it. We'll take the questions in a moment. In the 5th part of the series, we will explore the narrow gauge rolling stock of the Denver and Rio Grande Western, followed by a visit to the East Broad Top. Please consider joining us. I think it's scheduled in 2 months. Next month, my good friend Bob Wondrock from Wisconsin is scheduled to be doing a show on backdrops I've seen Bob's show twice. The guy is the master of backdrops. Do make sure you're here. And with that, if anyone has any questions, let's get them out there. Oh my God, I put everyone to sleep.
Well, Ed, I find it very interesting when you got to the Durango Silverton part. I've ridden the train from Durango to Silverton and back, and of course in Silverton, I guess the main line stops in the middle of the street. That might be the extension you were talking about, but I can remember that very vividly, and some very beautiful country through that area. And
Yes, it is.
that area we were talking with the zip lines, I remember that very much. So we made a stop there on the way down, I think it was, to pick some folks up. There was people zipping across the train. That was sort of interesting to see. I can say that.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
if you
it's
haven't had a chance, oh, I'm sorry, my name's Jim Laval. If you haven't had a chance to ride the cumbersome Toltec, that's a great place, a great railroad to ride. And it's a lot like the Rio Grande was back in the day, not as touristy oriented as the Silverton. They're both wonderful places to go. And I had the good luck to be on a 2 day photo run by on the Cumbersome Toltec when they had a national narrow gauge convention in Colorado Springs many years ago.
I've ridden the cumbersome
And I just want
Toltec.
to say, and I just want to say thanks a lot for your presentation. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I've ridden the cumbersome Toltec uh, 3 times. In fact, if you look at my picture, that's a cumbersome Toltec scene behind me. Uh, it's a wonderful ride. I mean, it's all day. I mean, I rode it back in for the first time, I believe back in '71 when they still had the box cars with the fiberglass seats. Not so user friendly, shall we say. Uh, it's a wonderful operation. Uh, they've got a wonderful assortment of rolling stock, and they're very cooperative with the rail historian enthusiast community. The Rango and Silverton has become very commercial, but they keep the equipment wonderfully up to snuff, wonderfully faithful to its original design. I mean, so, there's a lot to be said for both. Uh, in fact, if you do it, I recommend you travel both. Now, I have separate shows on the Durango and Silverton and on the Compass and Toltec Scenic. I mean, you've been getting a whole dose here and a little more coming of Denver Rio Grande Western Narrow Gauge. So I think, I talk to Ernie if he wants more. That's fine. If he wants something else, you know, it's, and I'm not trying to make decisions for Ernie because that's his job. But if he wants me, I'm here.
Well, I
Any other
appreciate that,
questions?
Ed, and you've done a fine job for us to this point. I can tell you that I've really enjoyed the views of the various narrow gauge and not realizing it started into whales and such. I've learned a lot through your clinic
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, Ernie. I have a sneaky part 6 if you want on the Rio Grande Southern, but again, vintage photographs like you just saw. But, it's there reaches a saturation point. I'm not sure where that is, and you know the Potomac Division better than I. And so I want to thank you all. I want to thank you, Ernie, for giving me this chance. And I guess I'll leave it at that unless somebody else has another comment or question.
No problem at all, Ed. Folks, just some upcoming things in February. February 14th, we have an in-house clinic, if you will, up at the Hobby Barn, dealing with the building of sound modules by Jeff Jordan. And I think it's going to be February 15th is the Making Photos uh, backdrops by Mr. One Drop, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've heard a lot of good things about that. So those are the next two events coming up, and the last one is going to be a series of clinics coming up in the spring. The board has talked and is in the process of developing a series of clinics on the achievement program and achievement program requirements so that maybe we can try to put those in English so everybody can understand them and be able to answer questions with regards to the various categories of the achievement program. So look for that in the spring. We're going to be talking about it at the board meeting Tuesday night and try to get the schedule out sometime in the next 30 to 60 days. But otherwise, Ed, thank you once again very much for another excellent presentation. And it's always good to see these trains. They're something totally different. I never saw them when they were actually running. I can say that, being from northwestern Pennsylvania. I was right there, I guess, at the start of the diesel age on the Pennsy up there, but I never had an opportunity to see these great trains here.
Yes, yes. And by the way, you were mentioning upcoming events. I know it's a bit of a drive from the Potomac Division area, but next weekend we have the Amherst Railroad Show in East Springfield, Massachusetts. And if you've never been there, you should be there at least once in your life.
Oh yeah, I've been there 4 or 5 times now. It's always spectacular, a large event, a lot of people, and a lot of good vendors, and a lot of good model railroads there to see also.
I I work with a model railroad club in Wisconsin. We came to Amherst last year, and we were shocked when we drove home with the best in show layout. So I have very fond thoughts of Amherst.
Very good. Okay, so there's no other questions, folks. We'll let Ed go to what he needs to do. I know there's football coming on. That's another challenge we have here. So with that, y'all take care, stay healthy. Ed, we'll
Okay.
see you at the next part 5. Looking forward to it. And everybody take care, stay healthy.